Israel is one of the world's richest economies. They are the leaders in cutting-edge technology, cybersecurity, and defense industries. The country is even referred to as the startup nation due to its innovative ecosystem. But what's far more unique about Israel is that the country only has a small geographic size. The total area of the state of Israel is just 22,145 square kilometers. New York, for instance, is nearly 3 times larger, with a total area of about 54,556 square kilometers. Moreover, Israel only has 9.5 million people, which, as obvious as it is, if we compare it to any other nation out there, Israel would likely lag behind. So, despite these constraints, Israel has become one of the world's richest economies. How can we say this? Well, if we take a look at the nominal gross domestic product, GDP, of Israel, we get to see that it isn't really that big. Here, you can see the ranking of some select major economies. Israel's GDP isn't that high. It's only at $513 billion as of 2023. While it puts them above Singapore, Hong Kong, and other similar economies, they are, of course, far below than the United States, China, and other major economies. So, why is Israel's economy considered successful and rich? Well, if you take a look at the GDP per capita, which assesses the economic output per person of a country, then we get to see that Israel is actually quite far ahead. Here in the graph, you can see that they have higher per capita than Hong Kong, the United Kingdom, Japan, South Korea, and a long list of other major economies. They are even ahead of some oil-rich economies in the Middle East. But did you know that despite being located in the Middle East, Israel isn't actually a resource-rich country like many of its neighbors? Unlike Saudi Arabia, the UAE, or Qatar, Israel does not have vast reserves of oil or natural gas that can serve as a primary economic driver. Instead, Israel's wealth has been built on human capital, innovation, and strategic industries. Thus, Israel's economy is built uniquely. But just how big is this economy? Well, as we have already discussed GDP, let's talk about the many other sectors that contribute to the overall economy of Israel and see just how big its economy is. The most important economic contributor to Israel is no other than the technology sector. Israel is home to some of the world's biggest tech firms. Here's a graph on the largest companies in Israel by market capitalization. Here you can see that the companies listed are worth tens of billions of dollars, with the largest one, known as Checkpoint Software, being valued at over $24 billion as of the time of writing. Most of the companies that you see in the list are tech firms like CyberArk, Monday.com, and Mobileye. But just how do these tech companies actually contribute to the overall GDP? Well, here's a graph on the high-tech output to GDP of Israel. What this data is about is how much of Israel's total economic output comes from its high-tech sector. As you can see in the graph, Israel's high-tech industry contributes a significant portion to the country's GDP. This is actually much more than most advanced economies out there. For the latest year available in 2023, it's over 19.7%. Unfortunately, finding a comparative graph is quite difficult, but here's a graph on the tech sector as a percentage of GDP of the United States. Here you can see that the US, despite being home to the world's largest and most influential tech companies, has a tech sector contributing around 8.9% for 2023, which is significantly lower than Israel's 19.7%. This just means that Israel's economy is far more dependent on high tech compared to even the United States, which has giants like Apple, Google, and Microsoft. Here's a graph on the high-tech exports of Israel. Here you can see that, just like their high-tech contribution to the economy, their high-tech exports are actually significant. Yes, it doesn't seem like a lot. For 2022, it's just $71.1 billion. But if we take a look at the share of the high-tech sector to the total exports of the country, we get to see that for the year 2022, the share of high-tech exports to GDP is a massive 48.3%, meaning that nearly half of Israel's exports are actually coming from high-tech exports. Again, this showcases the importance of the high-tech sector to Israel's economy. Now, of course, the high-tech sector is an integral part, but it's not all there is to it, right? Indeed, there are other sectors, like its defense sector. Israel is one of the world's largest defense exporters, with a military-industrial complex that plays a crucial role in both its economy and national security. In fact, Israel consistently ranks among the top 10 arms exporters in the world, alongside global giants like the United States, Russia, and China. Here's a graph on Israel's arms exports by year. Here you can see the total value reported defense contracts signed from 2000 to 2023. These are significant figures. Of course, they aren't as big as the high-tech sector, but for the latest year in 2023, it's still big at over $13 billion. But as some of you may wonder, how can this be? Isn't Israel a small country? How can it produce some of the most in-demand products? Well, one can thank companies like Israel Aerospace Industries, IAI, Rafael Advanced Defense Systems, and Elbit Systems, the three giants of Israel's defense industry. They produce products ranging from unmanned aerial vehicles to missile systems, iron domes to spike missiles and military communications. These products are being used even in the United States, which goes to show that the world's richest economy and biggest military spender even relies on a small country for some of its products. Now, there's much more about Israel's economy than these. Of course, they have other industries like their service sector or manufacturing sector. But those aren't really as significant when we talk about Israel. It lies in these two sectors, high-tech and defense. What we want to talk about next is the foreign players that have helped push Israel's economy. There are two players here, foreign direct investments and the United States. Let's first start with foreign direct investments. Here's a graph on the FDI, net inflows of Israel, data from the World Bank. Here you can see that FDI net inflows have been around $15 billion to $20 billion in the past few years. Whether this may seem significant or not, however, depends on who you ask. When you compare it to the United States, China, or even just Singapore, it is small. But you have to take note that this money is significantly going into Israel's high-tech industry. Unlike Singapore, which sees its FDI flowing into finance, logistics, and real estate. If you compare the two countries, and even other major cities out there on the amount of money startups raised the most from 2013 to 2022, you get to see that Israel far surpassed Singapore. They aren't as big as the United States, but they even surpass London, Paris, Berlin, and surprisingly, even Los Angeles. Beyond foreign investments, we also have to talk about the role of the United States. The US has helped Israel in many ways. For instance, here's a graph on the cumulative US aid from 1946 to 2024. Data in constant US dollars from the Council on Foreign Relations. Here you can see that US aid to Israel far surpasses any other nation out there. South Korea, for instance, is a major American ally. They have been documented as one of the biggest recipients of US aid and have used that money to help build its economy. But Israel far surpasses that very country. In total, this is over $310 billion, which if we compare it to Israel's nominal GDP for 2023, which is over $513 billion, then US aid to Israel amounts to more than 60% of the country's annual nominal GDP. But this figure, however, is adjusted for inflation, so the actual dollar amounts received each year were lower in nominal terms. Still, this cumulative aid remains significant, demonstrating the deep financial and strategic relationship between the US and Israel. Most of this aid, however, is provided as a grant under the Foreign Military Financing (FMF) program, which are funds that Israel must use to purchase US military equipment and services. So, while it receives billions in aid, a large portion of that money flows back into the US defense industry, benefiting American companies like Lockheed Martin, Boeing, and Raytheon. Furthermore, it may help Israel's economy, but it is doubtful that it actually contributed to the growth of Israel's high-tech sector. More likely, it has helped bolster Israel's defense capabilities, which have indirectly contributed to the high-tech sector. So, as you can see, Israel is indeed a successful and rich economy that thrives off of its high-tech and defense sector. But anyway, do let us know what you think. Thanks for watching.